Let's start with 2 Corinthians 5:10, where Paul wrote, "For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each one may be recompensed for his deeds in the body, according to what he has done, whether good or bad." So what I want you to do, if you can, is see it again for the first time, because we've heard 2 Corinthians 5:10 so many times that most of you can quote it, maybe not exactly word for word, or maybe not in the New American Standard Version. You may be King James or New King James, but you know it really well. And the challenge here is that when we know something so well, it just gets to losing its impact a little bit. It's almost a little bit like the teacher in Charlie Brown cartoon. You just almost hear a wah, wah, wah instead of what is really said there. What he is telling us is the way we live our life, our deeds, our choices, our decisions, our actions, our word, all of this is really setting the stage for our judgment. We are deciding today by the choices we make, whether when we stand before the judgment seat of Christ to be recompensed for our deeds, whether it's going to be a day of woohoo, raise your hands up and shout and be happy because it's a victorious day, or whether we're going to hang our head in shame and walk away and to run. And we're making all of that choice. Jesus said, "But I tell you that every careless word that people speak, they'll give account of it for the day in judgment." So now Paul said, "You'll be recompensed for your deeds." Christ brings up our words. And so I'm just going to point out in these two verses, it's our actions, it's the things we do, and then it is also the words that come out of our mouth. And it occurs to me, I probably should have added, what was that, James 4:17? Everyone who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin. I'm calling that one off the top of my head, so double check my reference there. So this accountability, this responsibility we have, you could say opportunity, this is really, really serious. Because as we get closer and closer to the end of life, and we are all getting closer to the end of life, we're setting up our eternity. Whether we're going to sit on the other side and really be glad and rejoice, or sit with the rich man and kind of moan and commiserate over all the bad decisions we made. So what we're going to talk about is planning wisely and really anticipating that judgment, because this is where we all go. And what we really want is to get there in that day and hear, of course, him say, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." But the only way the one who will not lie can say, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant," is if we have done well in goodness and faithfulness, because he's not going to lie about it. And, so he's not like a coddling old grandpa or something like that. So judgment day is coming. Romans 14, verse 10 through 12. He says, "Why do you judge your brother? Or you again, why do you regard your brother with contempt?" So he's saying, watch out where you focus here. For we're all stand before the judgment seat of Christ. Now we'll try to parse this out a little bit. We do help one another, but if you get over focused on judging your brother and why everybody else is wrong, you can forget about self. And it's really easy to do, because it is a lot easier to look at somebody else and decide why they're right or they're wrong or this and that than it is to look in the mirror and criticize yourself. So Paul points out, we're going to stand before the judgment seat of Christ, where it is written, "As I live, says the Lord, every knee shall bow to me, every tongue shall give praise to God." So then each one of us will give an account of himself to God. And that's where you really need to focus in on, is that try to imagine yourself. I don't know how you want to imagine it. I'm going to leave that up to you. Most of us, because we're modern Americans, are going to think of a modern courtroom. And probably every one of us have been in a modern courtroom at one time or another, maybe not because we had to be there. Well, jury duty, you may had to be there. And you kind of see yourself, the judge is sitting up there on the docket or whatever he calls all that stuff, and he's kind of higher than you, and you're standing down there and you're just kind of at his mercy. Now, however you want to imagine it, I'm not going to quibble with you, but really kind of hone into that. One of these days, it's God. And it's you. And it's you alone. You don't get a team of attorneys, or you don't have a Supreme Court and all that other stuff. And so you want to be really anticipating that day and avoid the distractions. Philippians 2:12 tells us to work out our own salvation with fear and trembling. So we know there are other people out there. We know other things influence us and what have you, but we have to own it. I am responsible. Now, again, I'm not responsible for everything that happens in the world, but I am 100% totally responsible for how I respond to it, how I deal with it, how I manage it. That's all on me. And that's the same with each one of us. So, there are situations out there you wish didn't happen. Some of them are ugly. Some things are bad. Sometimes you're the victim. Sometimes you're just in the wrong place at the wrong time, but how we respond to it, what it brings out of us, that's where we need to be working out our own salvation with fear and trembling and always focusing on that. So I don't think Paul's going to tell you don't ever judge your brother. Maybe a sense we could say that, but generally speaking, we help one another. And that means you got to deal with things from time to time. But don't forget, we each stand before the judgment seat of Christ. We each stand there. And as he said in 2 Corinthians 5 and 10, we each give an account of the deeds we did. And that should be your primary, your number one focus. 1 Corinthians 9:27, I think Paul is alluding to this whole idea. And I know I use 1 Corinthians 9:27 a lot, and I'm afraid, it's kind of dull. You kind of lose your hearing on it. But here he says, I'm going to discipline my body. I'm going to make it my slave, so that after I preach to others, I myself will not be disqualified. And so again, the thing is to really, really be aware of self. Now let me run three, four things here just really quick. I'm going to encourage you primarily keep your eye on your own paper. Stay in your own lane. Don't be sticking your nose where people hadn't invited it in. Mind your own business, or sweep your own front porch, however you want to say it. But that's it. That's really where you want your predominant focus. Again, Philippians 2 and verse 12. Now, you're going to have to let your light shine. And yes, you have to say things. Some of this depends on your position where you're at. So let me see if I can articulate it without too much detail. A parent, the father specifically, Ephesians 6:4, where he says, fathers, raise your children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, has a whole lot of business saying a whole lot of stuff to the kids that he helped bring into this world. Likewise, mama's got a whole lot of business sticking their nose straight into their business, right? I don't think any of us would argue that, especially when they're still at home under your roof. Now, that being said, how much business does a stranger at Walmart have sticking their nose in your child's business, telling them how to live their life? See, it differs. It varies a little bit. Now, those of us who are my age and older go, wait a minute, I remember when I was a kid, any adult could say a whole lot of stuff, and when Mama found out, she stood with the adults. And I think there was a lot of value in that. But even then, the other adults in the neighborhood knew there was a certain boundary there. And then the boundaries change a little bit as the kids grow up. So you've got Archer, who's 13, so Mickey can say and Allie can say anything they want to say to him because he is absolutely their kid, right? What about when he's 43? What about when he's 66 and Daddy's 92? You see what I'm saying? So while we always want to help other people, and you want to be a good example, and there's things to say, the example's the more important part, in my opinion. There's an old saying, goes way back, I don't even know where it started, but it's your children more attention pay to what you do than what you say. Now, I want to be careful because the saying needs to be there. So, you got to say things, but you got to have the lifestyle that backs it up. Because we all know how it works. When you have a horrible track record and then you try to give somebody good advice, they just look at you, wag their finger in your face, go, don't you be talking to me. I know all about you. So, self first. Philippians 2:12. Work out your own salvation. Be sure that you're not disqualified. Sure, you're giving good information to other people. You're out there telling them God's truth. That's good. and then you end up in hell. That wasn't a good deal right there, right? So we got some rules that are going to be used in judgment, and we've been told the rules ahead of time, which is totally awesome. Jesus said, John 12:48, he who rejects me and does not receive my saying has one who judges him. The word I spoke is what will judge him in the last day. So now, I think this is awesome. Because number one, that means your opinion doesn't count. God isn't going to get me in front of the judgment seat of Christ. I'm standing there, however you want to imagine that. And they go, hey, Jeff, what'd you think about your preacher? I can't make up my mind. I need you to cast the deciding vote. Now, I really like Jeff. Don't mean him any disrespect, but he don't get the deciding vote. Now, if somebody did, I'd rather it be one of my grandkids because they still kind of like me. But you see, that doesn't work that way. You don't get any of that. It's going to be His word. This is going to be it. And He's going to measure us by His word. And He's going to either say, well done, thou good and faithful servant, or He's going to go, depart. I know you're not. So here He's got the Bible, and we've got the rules, and we've got everything there. And this is, as I say, way more than history. I know it's easy to read it, even today's reading. I was doing it this morning. It's easy to look at it as history, but it's not just history. It's about teaching us how to do the will of God. And as you read about the duplicity in their heart, and this morning's reading, you hadn't read it, this is where it really isn't a spoiler, but they were bringing him the half-hearted stuff, the lame stuff, the stolen stuff, and he says, take that to your own governor and see if he'll accept it. And you're reading the story, and it's a good read, and it does feel a little bit like you're reading a story, but he's telling us, this is how we relate to God. And we don't take Him the half-hearted. We don't take Him the leftovers. We don't take Him the lame whatever, the stuff we really don't want. We give Him our best. And so everything you read, it's not just history. Yes, there's history there, but that is your winning game plan. So Psalms 119, 105, it's a little hard to make the connection sometimes, but it says, your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. Okay, today's reading was a lamp to our feet, a light to our path. Now, you got to think a little bit to pull it out of history and make application. It's the old thing, those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. And so we take that history and then we look at the principle behind it. We look at what was going on. What did Israel do wrong there? What were they messing up? That's not too hard to do, is it? Can I put it in a New Testament term? They were lukewarm. They were half-hearted. They didn't care. They were just going through the motions. They were just doing it to do it and thought, well, God ought to be happy I even showed up. Now, that didn't work for them, and we got to make the self-application for us. So we have the rules given to us. Jesus said in Matthew 7:21, who doesn't know this one by memory yet? Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but who does the will of my Father in heaven. Now, I highlighted the he who does the will of my Father in heaven, because this is where I think we need to predominantly focus, is on reading to do the Father's will, reading to obey, reading to subject, reading to draw near, reading to imitate Him, to be holy as He's holy, just all of that stuff. And it's so easy to get run off onto these other questions. Now, I'm going to give you a list of other questions here. I'm not going to answer these because we don't have the ultimate answer. Now, if you want to get together over coffee and hear my thoughts on any of these questions, I'll share you my thoughts. But after we drink a pot or two of coffee, all you've got's my opinion. And I could still be wrong. But these don't relate directly to us doing the will of the Father, which is where I'm going to tell you to do your primary focus. So, how do you have a God without a beginning? I know youngsters will ask this question. Sometimes it'd be a first grader. Who was God's daddy? And you go, well, he didn't have one. Well, how is he here if he didn't? There's all kinds of crazy questions. I had one kid ask me once, and if I mention his name, you'd know him, but he walked up to me and said, when did God die? And I'm like, what? He said, well, you got to die to get to heaven. God's in heaven. When did God die? And I said, well, it doesn't work that way. It's just one of those questions. Now I'm back to, how do you have God who doesn't have a beginning? I don't know. I really don't know. I don't have a clue. I just know something had to always exist. So, that's the best I got for you on that one. Don't get too hung up on that one. Here's one that really hangs people up. Remember when Lot took the angels in and then the men were at the door and Lot said, here, take my virgin daughters. And every time we do that in our annual reading, people are like, how in the world could he offer his virgin daughters to the crazy mob? I don't know. I'm like, if you're my visitor and it's between you and my daughter, I'm like, you're out of luck. I'm picking my daughter first. That's the way I would work. But this is just one of those questions that, if you think of it when you get to heaven, you can ask, do all angels have 6 wings? Seraphim have 6 wings. It's very clearly described there in Isaiah. Seraphim have 6 wings. Why do we all have angels with just 2 wings? I don't know. Do all angels even have wings? I don't know. What was gopher wood? I haven't a clue. I really don't care about that one myself. How do we interpret the book of Revelation? That one animal with the eyes all around it and everything? I know what we say. That's just representative of God seeing everything everywhere. Okay, that works for me. You got animals with 6 horns and 7 horns. You got this multi-headed dragon. What do you do with all that stuff? And people get so hung up in that, they forget, it's really about doing the will of the Father. Here's a good one. Why does God allow suffering? That's a tough one, isn't it? All right. Why didn't God talk directly to us? Wouldn't it be easier if I could just go to McDonald's and, I hope this doesn't sound too disrespectful, but God would meet me there at 10 o'clock and sit down across the table from me and we just have coffee and sip and we have a conversation just like some of us do. But he didn't do it that way. He gave me a book, and from my time, it's 2,000 years old. And I've got to read it and learn and ponder and meditate and discern. I don't know why he did it that way. I just know he did it that way. What's the resurrected body feel like? I don't have a clue. I haven't quite figured this one out yet. I did have somebody ask me in Bible class once. They say, okay, you're in the hospital. You're on the first floor. You die. As you're ascending to heaven, do you see everybody on the 2nd floor, and then the 3rd floor, and then the 4th floor? I don't know. So I'm not saying these questions are wrong. I'm just saying don't get distracted by them. So if you want to sit down and have coffee and talk about any of these questions or any question I don't have up here, I'll shoot the breeze with you, and I'll give you my opinion. Just understand at the end of the day, that's all you got. And opinions are like elbows. Everybody's got more than one, and most of them aren't very good looking. So get back to Christ's teaching. This is where you want to come back to. Anyone who goes too far, does not abide in the teaching of Christ, does not have God. He who abides in the teaching has both the Father and the Son. So what you're going to get is off to a good start. We're going to say faith, repentance, confession, baptism. There's your good start. And then you're going to learn to walk the straight and narrow way. And you're going to be looking at, what does God want me to do? What is the will of, because who gets into heaven? He didn't say, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, they will enter the kingdom of heaven, but who figures out the mysteries of the book of Revelation. That's not what it said, is it? Everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, enter the kingdom of heaven, not everyone, but he who figures out how eternal deity can exist without being. That's not what it says. It says the one that gets into heaven is he who does the will of the Father. Seems pretty simple to me. Does God want me to be baptized? Absolutely yes. Okay, that's all I need to know. I'll be baptized in remission of my sins, just like the Bible says, and I'll let somebody else argue everything else if they want to argue. But I'm going to do the will of the Father that I understand in the book, and that's verbatim book, chapter, and verse right there. So you get back to 2 Timothy 2:15. You study to show yourself approved to God. At workmen need not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. That's what we do. That is doing the will of the Father when you start learning His rule book. Because that's what He gave us. He gave us a rule book. So we're going to take total responsibility here. We're going to own this with all we've got. We're going to learn it because it is all on us. There are a lot of people that gave into the clergy laity system where it says, well, the preacher's supposed to figure all that out. And they're going to stand in front of the judgment seat of Christ dumb as a box of rocks, not having done the will of God, thinking they can blame it on their preacher. The only thing they're going to do is join their preacher and run, because that's where he is if that's the kind of nonsense he's been teaching. So we're going to get in there, we're going to own it, we're going to totally own it, and then we're going to do what we do. We're going to act. It's going to be sowing the seed. So don't be deceived. God's not mocked. For whatever a man sows, this he will also reap. For the one who sows to the flesh will from the flesh reap corruption. One who sows to the Spirit will from the Spirit reap eternal life. And the sowing is just where you put in your time. That's really it. Your actions. It's your use of time. That's the seed we're planting. That's it. It doesn't have to be particularly horribly immoral. He said, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, right? Am I prioritizing God in my life? Am I really sowing the seed? Am I being a good steward? Am I being a good servant? That walking in the footsteps of Jesus, that kind of thing. And just because we have a good intention, so what? I've had a good intention to lose weight for how many years have y'all known me? Since 1995. I've always been a big boy. I've had a good intention for almost 30 years to lose weight. Okay, be honest with me. How's it worked? You ain't going to hurt my feelings. I can look in the mirror too and see it myself, right? Good intentions are fine, but it doesn't get anything done. God's not looking for a good intention. God is looking for somebody who will take a good action. And it can be a small action. The small ones count. Matthew 10:42. Whoever in the name of a disciple gives one of these little ones even a cup of cold water to drink, truly I say he shall not lose his reward. Then Luke 16:10, which I use all the time lately. He who's faithful in a very little thing is faithful also in much. He who's unrighteous in a very little thing is also unrighteous in much. So what God is really looking for is not great, big, fabulous, earth-changing actions and programs and what have you. He's looking for love, loyalty. I hope this doesn't sound too trivial, but just manners nowadays. Just to acknowledge that somebody is there and treat them with respect. In the South, we have our different way of doing it than other cultures. I get that. But, we're yes, sir, yes, ma'am, thank you, please, you're welcome. Those things, emphasizing just that little respect. And when those are done in a way that honors God, not just because mama's going to slap you if I don't say yes, ma'am, or thank you, but as we start to see Jesus died for this other person. He loved them that much. They're due. Just the common consideration of manners, which is crazy lacking in our society now. Small things. Doesn't have to be great, big, fabulous, earth-shaking. In fact, those don't happen very often. Make every day count, Ephesians 5:15. Therefore be careful how you walk, not as unwise, but wise men, making the most of your time, because the days are evil. And so you're going to get 70, 80 years to use Psalm 90:10. Nowadays, where a lot of us are getting more than that 80, and that's really good. Make the most of them. Do something with them. A long life is no big deal. A short life can be quite powerful. How old do we think Christ was when he died? We think it was about 33 and a half. That's a pretty short life, isn't it? When Stephen was stoned, they think Stephen was really on the young side of life. And we still talk about his life. And so it's not the time on the calendar that really counts. It's what you did with the time on the calendar. And so you just need to be mindful of that and really focus in on it. Colossians 3:1-2. If you've been raised up with Christ, keep seeking the things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on things that are on the earth. That's the owning it. Now, I get we're going to do things on earth, but they're not the priority. They're not the reason of life. They're not the cause of life. And as much as we can, We're going to weave those into our working into the kingdom, our spiritual development, our spiritual growth. And we're going to focus. I would have to go back to speech here. James 3:2 said we'll stumble in many ways. If anyone doesn't stumble in what he says, he's a perfect man, able to bridle his own body. Our mouth, that's going to be the toughest challenge. And so everything's coming our mouth. Again, as we said at the opening, we're setting the stage for our judgment day to be victorious, awesome, wonderful, or really disappointing. And predominantly it's right here at the mouth. Why? Because the mouth speaks from the heart. And so Solomon would tell us that death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruits. I'm going to tell you this verse, I'm going to do kind of a little twist on it. It's our own death and life that are at stake. Now, I know I can make somebody else miserable with my words. I get that. I can destroy somebody with my words if I wanted to, if I was evil enough. But I would rather flip it around and go, okay, self, this is my own death and life that's coming out of my own mouth. That's a whole nother perspective right there, isn't it? That makes you want to go, well, I don't know if I want to talk or not. So we're going to focus on that because in Matthew 12:36 we had that we give an account for every careless word we speak. The next verse he says, for by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. That puts a pretty heavy load right there. Our words are sowing the seed. We are growing life or we're growing death. We're setting victory up for the day of judgment, or we're setting ourselves up for total disappointment. And when we get there, we don't get to blame anybody. That has to be said, because in our society, it's always somebody else's fault. Somebody else did this, somebody else did that. I'm really not at fault because somebody else goofed up. This gets a little technical. I think I got time to do this. Other people do mess up. Other people did do wrong. Absolutely. I cannot say that assessment's incorrect. But I can say don't let somebody else's failure become your failure. Just because somebody else has messed up, don't take the victim card and sit around and let them destroy your life. Just because they can't get it together doesn't mean I can't get it together. And I know it was all the way back in the 70s I heard a speaker say, just because somebody else failed at X, Y, or Z, does that make you a failure at X, Y, or Z? This whole thing about wanting to blame everybody else for all my problems, that just goes all over me, because it disempowers you. Once you say, it's all on Washington, it's all their fault, now you're a helpless little victim. You got nothing you can do but sit around, drink coffee, and whine about how ugly life is. Well, how does that fix anything? That doesn't fix anything. I mean, we can talk about Washington being ugly. I'll do it too, but it ain't fix anything. If sitting around talking about all the problems in the world fixed all the problems in the world, we wouldn't have any problems. Other people mess up. Most other people mess up. Now, do I want their failure to become my failure? No, I don't. I absolutely don't. I'm going to figure me a way out and around it. And so my words are growing my life. And I want to be careful, because when it says let no unwholesome word proceed out of your mouth, we think of the 4-letter words, the swear words and stuff. That's included. But sitting around whining and moaning and complaining like a victim's included too. What's wholesome about that? Well, I'd have done better, but I was just born into a bad family. Okay. Man, some people are born into a bad family and excel like crazy. Others are born into a rich family and go into drug and alcohol abuse. Well, I'd have done better, but I just wasn't as smart as that other kid in class. So what? A students aren't always the excelling ones. Used to be people hiring out of college preferred your B-level students. They had a better balance than the A students. I don't know if that's still true or not, But so when we talk about unwholesome words proceeding from your mouth, it's not, was that a 4-letter word Mama would have washed my mouth out for? It's, is this uplifting? Is it edification? Is it building me up? Is it adding grace to those who hear it? There's your contrast. And sometimes we miss that. So Paul's trying to protect us from ourselves here. And the only way to do that is to totally, absolutely own it. So we're going to pursue holiness. We're going to be absolutely intentional about our words and our action. We're going to think, because we are. I'm setting the stage. Even right this minute, we're setting the stage for judgment. This afternoon, you'll be setting the stage for judgment. Next week, 2 months from now. And you don't get to do it this way. You don't get to say, well, back in the 80s, I was really a good Christian. Yeah, I've fallen off the wagon, hadn't done too good lately, but no, sorry. When God comes back, He judges us as He finds us, not as we were. If we used to be bad and we're good when He comes back, or we go to Him, then that's great. If we used to be good and we're bad when He comes back, you don't get to build up on the past like that. So right now in the present, own it completely. Learn to be holy as God is holy. 1 Peter 1:5-15. And my last verse, don't look at the things that are seen, but keep trying to look at the things which are not seen. The Colossians 3:1-2, set your mind on heaven, which we had a while ago. That's what you want to do. Because the things you're looking at, they're temporary. You'll be dead and gone. Won't be too long after you're dead and gone, your kids will have gotten rid of all your stuff and have all your money and be doing stuff with it that you think is stupid if you get to know what they do with it. The only thing that matters are the things that are eternal. And that's what we're planning for. That's what we're doing right now. We're setting up our eternity by the choices we make. So what I want you to do is plan ahead. And I want you to enjoy a victory. And again, I don't know how it works. I would kind of like to hope that if it's there, and that we get to see each other come in, and then we can high five each other and woohoo together. You made it, And you look at me and go, I never thought you would make it. This is so cool, And we'll just be there, and then we can give each other a tour of heaven or however that. I don't know how it works, but I do know this. I want it to be a day of victory. I want it to be a day of joy, however that works out. And I know all of that for me is on me. Totally right here. And I know with Jeff, it's all on Jeff. I can be a good influence, but it's all on him. And I can be a good influence on Archer, but it's all on him. When it comes down to the judgment day, it's all on you. Make it a good one. I guess we'll close with a song. Who will follow Jesus? Well, you will if you want a good day in judgment. You'll follow Jesus. If you've not yet been baptized into Christ, our baptistry is ready. We're here to help any way we can. That's why we stand and sing.